The neon lights of Titan 9 flickered weakly, barely pushing back the shadows of the lawless colony. The air smelled of rust, oil, and something rotten. It was a place where people disappeared, where the strong took what they wanted, and the weak were left to rot. Grayson knew this world too well. He had lived in it for years, surviving as a mercenary, taking jobs that paid enough to keep him alive. He had no family, no friends, just his weapons and his instincts. It was easier that way. Tonight, he was searching for spare parts in the back alleys of the lower sector. The black market was too expensive, and he wasn't about to waste credits when he could scavenge. He moved quietly, his boots crunching on broken glass as he searched through the junk piles. Then he heard it, a sound too soft for the usual rats and scavenger drones. A whimper. Grayson turned, hand on his sidearm, scanning the darkness. His sharp eyes caught movement, a small figure half buried in the trash. At first, he thought it was just another dead body. The slums were full of those. But then, the figure moved again, struggling weakly, trying to push itself up. Grayson stepped closer, his boots stopping inches from the child. It was a boy, or at least partly. His body was thin, barely covered in tattered cloth. His skin was pale, but his arms had faint markings, like the patterns of an alien species. His hair was matted with dirt, his face gaunt from hunger. But the most shocking thing was his legs. He had none. His body ended at the waist, as if he had been born incomplete or had lost them long ago. Grayson expected fear in the boy's eyes, maybe pleading. But instead, the child glared up at him with defiance. His hands balled into weak fists, his expression full of anger, not despair. "Go away," the boy rasped, his voice dry from dehydration. Grayson didn't move. "You're gonna die here." The boy's eyes narrowed. So, Grayson studied him. This wasn't just some abandoned street kid. There was something different about him. His markings suggested he was a hybrid, part human, part something else. The colonies weren't kind to hybrids. They were treated as mistakes, outcasts, freaks. Grayson had seen many things in his time, but this, a child thrown away like trash, still fighting to survive. He didn't know why, but it made something tighten in his chest. He sighed. "You got a name, kid?" The boy didn't answer. "All right," Grayson muttered. He knelt down and picked up a can of old food from the junk pile. He pried it open with a small knife and held it out. "Eat." The boy hesitated, then snatched the can, shoving the food into his mouth like he hadn't eaten in days. Grayson let him, watching as he devoured the scraps. After a moment, the boy wiped his mouth and looked at him suspiciously. "Why do you care?" Grayson exhaled through his nose. He wasn't sure himself. Maybe he was just tired of watching everything around him rot. Maybe he saw a little of himself in this kid, thrown away, unwanted. "Come with me," he said. The boy tensed. "No. You'll die here." "I don't care." Grayson looked at him for a long moment. "Yeah, you do." The boy's jaw clenched, his small hands gripping the dirty ground beneath him. Grayson stood up. "Your choice, kid." He turned, walking away slowly. If the boy really wanted to be left there, Grayson wouldn't force him. He had barely taken 3 steps when he heard the soft voice behind him. "Wait." Grayson stopped. The boy looked down, as if hating himself for what he was about to say. I don't want to die." His voice was quiet, barely above a whisper. Grayson nodded. "Then let's go." Without another word, he reached down and lifted the boy into his arms. The child flinched at first, but didn't resist. He was lighter than Grayson expected, too light, as if he had been starving for weeks. As Grayson carried him through the dark streets, the boy's voice broke the silence. "Jax." Grayson glanced down. "What?" "My name," the boy muttered, as if embarrassed. "It's Jax." Grayson gave a small nod. "All right, Jax. Let's get you home." And with that, the lonely warrior and the abandoned child disappeared into the neon-lit night. Grayson's home wasn't much. It was a small, metal-walled room on the edge of the slums, hidden between old buildings. The lights flickered, the air was thick with machine oil, and the only furniture was a cot, a table, and a few crates filled with weapons and supplies. It wasn't a place for a child, but it was all he had. He carried Jax inside and set him down on a crate. The boy sat stiffly, glancing around, his small hands gripping the edge of the metal surface. He looked nervous, but hid it behind a blank face. Grayson sighed and grabbed a canteen from a shelf. He unscrewed the cap and handed it to Jax. "Drink." Jax hesitated for a second, then took it. He drank fast, his throat working as if he hadn't tasted clean water in days. When he was done, he wiped his mouth and set the canteen down carefully. Grayson watched him for a moment. The boy was young, maybe 8 or 9, but his eyes looked older, like he had seen too much. "What happened to you?" Grayson finally asked. Jax didn't answer right away. He stared at the floor, his fingers curling into fists. "I was made in a lab," he said quietly. "They called me a failed project." Grayson frowned. "Who did?" "Zenith Syndicate." Jax's voice was bitter. "They made hybrids like me. Tested us. Some of us were strong, useful. But me? I didn't have legs. They said I was broken. So they threw me away." Grayson's jaw tightened. He had heard of Zenith Syndicate before, one of the biggest biotech corporations in the outer colonies. They experimented with genetic engineering, splicing human DNA with alien species to create stronger soldiers, workers, and spies. Most people feared them. No one challenged them. And they had left this kid to die like garbage. Grayson exhaled through his nose. He should have expected this. Titan IX was full of people who had been used and discarded. But it didn't sit right with him. Jax suddenly looked up, his expression hard. "I don't need your help. I can take care of myself." Grayson raised an eyebrow. "That's so." Jax crossed his arms. "I don't want to be a burden." Grayson leaned against the wall, arms folded. "Listen, kid. You didn't ask to be here, and I didn't ask to find you. But you're here now. So whether you like it or not, I'm not letting you starve in the street." Jax stared at him, as if trying to figure out if he was serious. After a long moment, he muttered, "Why do you care?" Grayson sighed. "Maybe I don't. Maybe I just don't like seeing a kid get thrown away like trash." He pushed off the wall and walked to a shelf, grabbing a small food pack. He tossed it to Jax. "Eat." Jax caught it and tore it open. The food was nothing special, just a protein bar and dried fruit. But he ate fast, chewing like he was afraid it would be taken away. Grayson sat on the edge of his cot, watching him. The kid was stubborn, tough. He had survived this long without help, but that didn't mean he didn't need it. When Jax finished eating, he wiped his mouth and looked up. "What do you do?" Grayson shrugged. "Work." "What kind of work?" Grayson smirked. "The kind that pays." Jax frowned but didn't press further. Instead, he glanced down at his own body, his missing legs. His expression darkened. "I want to walk," he muttered. Grayson studied him. "That what you want?" Jax nodded. "I'm not weak. If I had legs, I could be strong." Grayson leaned back, rubbing his jaw. He had seen cybernetics before, soldiers with metal limbs, bounty hunters with enhanced bodies. But those things were expensive and dangerous. Still, maybe the kid was right. He wasn't weak. He had survived worse than most grown men. And Grayson, he had spent years fighting for nothing, killing for nothing. Maybe it was time to do something else. Finally, he stood up. "Get some rest, kid." Jax blinked. "You're not kicking me out." Grayson snorted. "No." Jax hesitated, then nodded slowly. He shifted on the crate, getting comfortable. For the first time, his body relaxed just a little. Grayson sat back down, arms crossed. He didn't know what he was doing. He wasn't a father. He wasn't good at taking care of people. But for now, he had a kid to look after. And maybe, just maybe, he had something worth fighting for. Jax woke up to the smell of metal and oil. He blinked a few times, adjusting to the dim light of the small room. For a moment, he forgot where he was. His heart pounded, expecting to see cold lab walls and hear the voices of Zenith scientists calling him a failure. But then he saw Grayson. The warrior sat at the table, cleaning his weapons with slow, practiced movements. His sharp eyes flicked toward Jax, then back to his work. "You're awake," he said. Jax sat up on the crate he had slept on, rubbing his face. His stomach grumbled. He was still not used to eating properly. "Yeah," he muttered. Grayson tossed a food pack onto the table. "Eat." Jax didn't argue. He tore it open and started eating, slower this time. He wasn't afraid the food would be taken away anymore. It felt strange, safe. As he chewed, Grayson leaned back in his chair. "You said you want to walk." Jax stopped eating. He swallowed hard and nodded. "Yeah." Grayson studied him for a moment, then stood up. "Come with me." Jax frowned. "Where?" "You'll see." Grayson grabbed his jacket and opened the door. Jax hesitated before pushing himself forward with his arms, lowering himself to the floor. He was used to dragging himself across rough surfaces, but this time, before he could move far, Grayson stepped back inside and crouched in front of him. "Hold on," the man said. Jax tensed as Grayson scooped him up, lifting him with ease. He was used to people looking at him like he was broken, like he was something to be pitied. But Grayson wasn't gentle in a way that made him feel weak. He just carried him like it was nothing. They stepped out into the streets of Titan 9. The city was alive with flickering neon signs, rusted buildings stacked on top of each other, and the constant hum of machines. People moved through the alleyways, smugglers, traders, mercenaries, and those who had nowhere else to go. Grayson carried Jax through the maze of streets until they reached a small workshop wedged between two massive scrapyards. A buzzing neon sign above the door read, "Dallon's Mods and Repairs." Grayson knocked twice before pushing the door open. Inside, the air was thick with smoke and burning metal. Shelves were stacked with cybernetic limbs, mechanical parts, and half-built machines. At the back of the room, a man with cybernetic arms and a long scar across his cheek was welding something together. He didn't look up. "You're late, Grayson," the man said. His voice was rough, like he had been breathing in smoke his whole life. Grayson smirked. "Didn't know I had an appointment." The man set his tools down and turned to face them. His eyes flicked to Jax. "This the kid?" Jax frowned. "Who's this?" "Dallon," Grayson said. "He's the best cybernetic engineer in this sector." Dallon snorted. "Best that's still alive, anyway." He stepped closer, eyeing Jax's legs, or where they should have been. "Hybrid, huh? You don't see many like him around." Jax stiffened, but didn't say anything. Grayson placed him down on a metal workbench. "Can you do it?" Dallon rubbed his chin. "Depends. You want him to walk, or you want him to run?" Jax blinked. "What?" Dallon grinned. "Kid, if you're getting cybernetic legs, might as well get some that make you faster than anyone else." Jax stared at him. "You can really do that?" Dallon nodded. "Yeah, but it won't be easy. You'll need to train. These won't just be normal legs. They'll be part of you. If you can't control them, they'll be useless." Jax clenched his fists. "I can do it." Dallon smirked. "All right, tough guy. Let's get started." He turned to a shelf and started pulling out mechanical parts, cables, and small glowing power cells. He laid them out on the workbench, then looked at Grayson. "This won't be cheap." Grayson crossed his arms. "I'll get the credits." Dallon chuckled. "You always do." For the next few hours, Dallon measured Jax's body, scanned his nervous system, and started designing the cybernetic legs. He explained how the connection would work, how Jax's brain would need to adjust to the new limbs, how it would take time to walk properly. But Jax didn't care about the difficulties. He had spent his whole life being told he was broken. This was his chance to prove everyone wrong. When the designs were finished, Dallin leaned back. "I'll have the parts ready in a few days. Come back then." Grayson nodded and lifted Jax off the workbench. As they stepped out of the shop, Jax looked up at him. "Why are you doing this?" Grayson sighed. "Because you want to walk." Jax shook his head. "That's not a real answer." Grayson was quiet for a moment. Then he finally said, "Because no one else did." Jax didn't know what to say to that. For the first time in his life, someone had given him a chance, and he wasn't going to waste it. Jax sat on the floor of Grayson's small home, staring at the mechanical parts spread out in front of him. Dallin had finished crafting the cybernetic legs, sleek and metallic with reinforced joints designed for speed. They weren't just replacements. They were upgrades. But now came the hard part. "You're gonna have to earn this," Grayson said, standing over him with his arms crossed. Jax frowned. "I thought they were mine already." "They are," Grayson said, "but having them and using them are two different things." Jax looked at the cybernetic limbs, his fingers twitching. He had imagined walking his whole life, imagined running. But now that the moment was here, doubt crept into his mind. What if he couldn't do it? What if his body rejected them? Grayson knelt beside him. "Listen, kid, no one's expecting you to get it perfect the first time. But if you want to walk, fight for it." Jax took a deep breath and nodded. "All right, let's do it." Grayson helped him onto the workbench. Dallin had already explained how the legs would connect directly to his nervous system. It would feel strange at first, like trying to move something that wasn't really part of him. But with time, his body would adapt. Jax gritted his teeth as Grayson attached the mechanical limbs to his lower body. A sharp jolt ran up his spine as the connection activated. He gasped, gripping the edge of the bench. The metal felt cold, foreign. But then, sensation. Not like real legs, but something close. Grayson stepped back. "Try moving." Jax focused. He thought about bending his knees, about shifting his feet, except they weren't really his feet. At first, nothing happened. Frustration bubbled up inside him. He tried harder. His new limbs twitched slightly. Grayson nodded. "Good. Keep going." Jax kept trying, forcing himself to focus. His muscles tensed, sweat forming on his brow. And then, one of his metal feet scraped against the floor. His heart pounded. It was small, but it was something. Grayson smirked. "Told you. Now, let's get you standing." Jax swallowed hard. Standing. That was another battle. But he wasn't going to quit. For hours, Jax trained. He fell more times than he could count. His body ached. His nerves burned from the strain. Every time he collapsed, Grayson made him get back up. Jax glared at him after his 10th fall. "You could help, you know." Grayson shrugged. "No one helped me when I had to learn to fight. You either get up or you stay down." Jax clenched his fists. "Then I'll get up." By the end of the night, he was standing. Wobbling, but standing. And when he took his first shaky step, something inside him changed. For the first time in his life, he felt like he was more than just a discarded experiment. A few days passed. Jax kept training, and soon he was walking. Then running. His new legs weren't just functional. They were powerful. He could move faster than he ever thought possible. Grayson watched him with a satisfied nod. "Not bad, kid." Jax grinned. "I can do more." He crouched low and jumped, soaring higher than any normal human could. He landed with a heavy thud, his feet sending small cracks through the dusty ground. His eyes widened. That was awesome. Grayson chuckled. "Told you Dallin was the best." Jax felt unstoppable. He could run, jump, move freely. He wasn't broken anymore. He turned to Grayson. "Thank you." Grayson just nodded. "Come on. We need to get supplies." The two of them headed into the city. Jax moved with confidence, keeping pace with Grayson as they walked through the crowded streets. He felt different. People looked at him, but not with pity, not with disgust. They just saw another person. For the first time, he felt normal. But then, everything changed. They were near the market when Grayson stiffened. His eyes scanned the street, his hand inching toward his weapon. Jax noticed. "What is it?" "Trouble," Grayson muttered. A group of men in black armor stepped into the street, blocking their path. Their helmets bore the mark of Zenith Syndicate. Jax's heart pounded. They had found him. One of the men, a tall figure with a cold expression, stepped forward. "Grayson." His voice was smooth, dangerous. "You have something that belongs to us." Grayson didn't move. "I don't think so." The man gestured toward Jax. "The boy. He's Zenith property. Hand him over, and we'll forget this ever happened." Jax's blood ran cold. Property. That's all he was to them. Grayson's hand was already on his gun. "He's not yours." The Zenith agent sighed. "We expected resistance." He nodded to his men. "Take them." The moment they moved, Grayson reacted. Gunfire erupted in the street. Grayson moved like a predator, his shots precise, taking down two mercenaries before they could react. The crowd screamed and scattered. Jax's body tensed. Fear gripped him, but only for a second. Then he remembered. He wasn't weak anymore. One of the mercenaries lunged at him. Jax moved faster than he thought possible, dodging to the side. His metal legs reacted instantly. He kicked forward. His foot slammed into the mercenary's chest, sending him flying into a stall. Jax stared at his own legs in shock. "Whoa." Grayson, still shooting, smirked. "Don't just stand there, kid. Move." Jax shook off his surprise and ran. He was faster than the mercenaries, dodging between crates and leaping over obstacles. They fired at him, but he was too quick. Grayson took down another attacker, then grabbed Jax's arm. "We need to go. Now." They sprinted through the alleys, bullets whizzing past them. Jax's heart pounded, but he felt more alive than ever. For the first time, he wasn't running from something. He was running toward a fight, and he wasn't afraid. As they disappeared into the shadows, the Zenith agent dusted himself off. He watched the direction they had escaped, his expression unreadable. One of his men limped forward. "Sir, should we pursue?" The agent smiled coldly. "No rush. We know where they are now." He turned, his voice calm. "And next time, we won't give them a chance to run." Jax's heart pounded as he and Grayson sprinted through the narrow alleys of Titan 9. The sounds of gunfire had faded behind them, but he knew Zenith Syndicate wouldn't give up so easily. They had found him once. They would find him again. Grayson led him through a maze of crumbling buildings, dodging between piles of scrap metal and broken-down machines. Jax kept up easily, his new legs propelling him forward with unnatural speed. He wasn't just keeping pace, he was faster. Grayson noticed and smirked. "You're getting the hang of it, kid." Jax grinned despite the danger. "I think I can go even faster." Later, Grayson said, scanning the rooftops for pursuers. "Right now, we need to disappear." They reached an old factory, its rusted doors barely hanging on their hinges. Grayson pushed one open and pulled Jax inside. The air smelled of oil and dust. The place had been abandoned for years. Grayson shut the door and pulled out his gun, checking the ammo. "We can't stay here long." Jax leaned against a wall, breathing hard. "They won't stop, will they?" Grayson shook his head. "No, Zenith doesn't like losing their property." His jaw tightened. "But you're not their property." Jax clenched his fists. He had spent his whole life being treated like an experiment, something to be tested and discarded. But now, for the first time, he had a choice. Grayson knelt in front of him. "Listen, kid, Zenith will send more men. stronger ones. You've got good legs now, but if you want to survive, you need to learn how to fight. Jax's eyes widened. You're going to teach me? Grayson smirked. Unless you'd rather run for the rest of your life. Jax straightened. No, I want to fight. Grayson nodded. Good. Then let's get started. For the next few hours, Grayson trained Jax. He started with the basics, how to move in a fight, how to use his speed to his advantage. Jax was a fast learner. His cybernetic legs gave him an edge, allowing him to dodge faster than a normal human. Grayson tossed him a small knife. Let's see what you can do. Jax caught it awkwardly, then adjusted his grip. Grayson came at him. Slow at first, testing his reflexes. Jax dodged left, then right, his movements sharp but untrained. He slashed at Grayson, but the older man knocked the knife from his hand easily. Too slow, Grayson said. Again. Jax picked up the knife and tried again. He kept losing, but he refused to quit. Every time he got knocked down, he got back up. Grayson respected that. After an hour, Jax managed to dodge one of Grayson's attacks and land a light cut on his arm. It wasn't deep, but it was something. Grayson grinned. Not bad. Jax grinned back. Told you I'm fast. Grayson chuckled. Fast is good. Smart is better. You're getting there. Jax wiped the sweat from his brow. He had never felt stronger in his life. For the first time, he wasn't just surviving. He was getting ready to fight back. But then, something crashed outside. Grayson's smile vanished. He grabbed his gun and moved to the door. Stay here. Jax wasn't about to listen. He followed, his heart racing. Grayson peeked through a crack in the door. His expression darkened. They found us. Jax tensed. How? Grayson shook his head. Doesn't matter. We need to move. A deep voice echoed from outside. Grayson, we know you're in there. Come out, and we won't make this painful. Jax recognized the voice. It was the Zenith agent from before. Grayson exhaled slowly. They brought more men this time. Jax clenched his fists. Then let's fight. Grayson looked at him, then smirked. Yeah, kid. Let's fight. The first explosion rocked the building. Grayson kicked the door open and fired before the dust settled. 2 Zenith soldiers dropped instantly. Jax dashed forward, moving so fast the enemy barely had time to react. He slammed into one of them, his metal legs driving the man backward into a wall. Grayson took down another with a well-placed shot. Keep moving, Jax. Jax didn't need to be told twice. He dodged incoming fire, his legs letting him leap over debris with ease. He felt unstoppable. He wasn't just escaping, he was fighting back. A soldier lunged at him. Jax twisted, slamming a kick into the man's ribs. The soldier hit the ground hard, groaning in pain. Jax turned just in time to see the Zenith agent from before watching him. Unlike the others, the agent wasn't fighting. He just stood there, observing. Jax froze. You. The agent smiled coldly. You've improved, but you're still just a failed experiment. Jax's grip tightened on his knife. I'm not a failure. The agent tilted his head. Prove it. Jax didn't hesitate. He lunged forward, knife flashing. But the agent was fast. He sidestepped easily and grabbed Jax's arm, twisting it painfully. Jax gritted his teeth, refusing to cry out. He kicked off the ground, using his legs to push himself into a flip, breaking free. He landed and attacked again. This time, he was faster. The agent barely dodged in time. Jax's blade nicked his side, drawing blood. The agent touched the wound and chuckled. Not bad. Maybe you're worth something after all. Jax didn't care about his words. He went in for another attack. But then, gunfire erupted. Grayson was surrounded. 3 soldiers had him pinned behind cover. Jax's heart pounded. He couldn't let them take Grayson. He turned and sprinted, faster than ever before. Before the soldiers could react, Jax was on them. He jumped, twisting in the air, and brought both feet down on one of the men's shoulders. The impact sent the soldier crashing to the ground. Grayson took the opportunity to shoot the other two. The Zenith agent watched with mild amusement. Interesting. Then he raised a hand, signaling his men to retreat. "We'll be seeing you again." And just like that, they were gone. Jax breathed heavily, his body aching from the fight. He turned to Grayson. "We won." Grayson nodded. This time. Jax knew he was right. Zenith wasn't done with them. But he wasn't afraid anymore. Next time, he'd be ready. Jax sat on the edge of a rooftop, staring at the city below. Neon lights flickered in the distance, and the hum of Titan IX's underworld filled the air. He flexed his cybernetic legs, still getting used to how natural they felt now. Behind him, Grayson leaned against a metal vent, arms crossed. "You're thinking too much," he said. Jax glanced at him. "Aren't you?" Grayson smirked. "Nah, I don't think. I act." Jax chuckled, but his smile faded. "They're going to come again." Grayson nodded. "Yeah. And next time, they won't just test us. They'll come to take you, or kill us both." Jax swallowed. The fight with the Zenith Syndicate had proven one thing. They wouldn't stop. The agent he fought last time had looked at him like he was some kind of experiment worth retrieving. Jax hated that. He was not their property. Grayson pushed off the vent and walked over. "That's why we strike first." Jax's eyes widened. "What? They think we're weak. They think we'll keep running," Grayson said. "But I've been running for too long, and I'm done. We're going after them." Jax felt something shift inside him. For so long, he had been running, hiding, surviving. But now, Grayson was offering him a choice, a real fight. A chance to end this. Jax stood. "Where do we start?" The next few hours were spent gathering information. Grayson had contacts all over Titan IX. Ex-soldiers, smugglers, people who owed him favors. One name kept coming up. Commander Rowe, the Zenith agent who had confronted them. He was in charge of operations in this sector. If they took him out, Zenith would hesitate before coming after Jax again. Dallin, the mechanic who had built Jax's legs, wasn't happy about the plan. "You're walking into a firestorm," he warned, wiping oil off his hands. "Zenith doesn't play fair." Grayson smirked. "Neither do I." Jax stood beside him, ready. He wasn't the scared kid in the trash heap anymore. He was stronger now. Faster. Dallin sighed. "I've got something for you then." He reached into a crate and pulled out a sleek, black vest. Reinforced armor. Light, but tough. "You're gonna need it." Jax put it on, feeling the weight of it. Dallin then handed him a small, curved blade. "You're fast. This'll help." Jax took it, gripping it tightly. He wasn't just some failed experiment. He was a warrior now. The plan was simple. Infiltrate. Eliminate. Escape. Commander Rowe was stationed at a Zenith facility on the outskirts of the city. It was a heavily guarded fortress, but Grayson had found a weakness, a supply route that ran through the back, less protected. They moved under the cover of night. Jax crouched behind a pile of metal crates, scanning the entrance. Two guards stood at the gate, their rifles glowing with charge indicators. Grayson whispered, "We take them quietly." Jax nodded. He moved first, silent as a shadow. His legs made no noise against the ground as he leaped onto the wall and pushed off, flipping over the first guard. Before the man could react, Jax's blade sliced through his weapon's power core, disabling it. Grayson handled the second guard with a swift strike to the neck, knocking him unconscious. They slipped inside. The facility was massive, filled with rows of cargo containers and Zenith personnel. Security drones hovered above, scanning the area. Jax's heart pounded. This was different from running. This was war. Grayson led the way, keeping to the shadows. They moved quickly, taking down guards one by one. Every time Jax fought, He felt himself getting stronger, faster. His legs made him more than human. He was something new. Then they reached the control room. Grayson hacked into the system, pulling up Ro's location. He's in the command center, top floor. Jax grinned. Let's go. They fought their way up, taking out Zenith soldiers as alarms blared. Jax moved like lightning, dodging bullets, striking with precision. Then they burst into the command center. Commander Ro stood waiting. He wasn't surprised. He was smiling. I knew you'd come, he said, hands behind his back. Grayson raised his gun. Then you know why we're here. Ro chuckled. To kill me? Go ahead. But it won't stop Zenith. Jax clenched his fists. I'm not afraid of you. Ro's gaze locked onto him. Not yet. Then he moved. Faster than Jax expected, Ro lunged, striking with inhuman speed. Jax barely dodged in time, his cybernetic legs pushing him backward. But Ro was relentless. He grabbed Jax's arm and twisted, throwing him across the room. Jax hit the ground hard, gasping. He's strong. Grayson fired, but Ro dodged effortlessly, closing the distance in a blink. He struck Grayson, sending him crashing into a console. Jax forced himself up. He wouldn't lose. Not now. He launched forward, using his full speed. Ro blocked, but Jax adapted. He feinted left, then twisted, bringing his blade down. Ro caught it. His grip was like steel. You're impressive, Ro said. But you're still just a creation. Zenith made you, and they will reclaim you. Jax growled. I made myself. He kicked forward, his metal legs slamming into Ro's ribs. The force sent Ro staggering. Jax didn't stop. He attacked again, faster, striking with everything he had. For the first time, Ro looked surprised. Jax's final strike sent the commander crashing into a control panel, sparks flying. Grayson stood, wiping blood from his lip. Not bad, kid. Jax panted. Did we win? Ro coughed, still alive. You have no idea what you've done. Grayson pulled out a detonator. Yeah, we do. He pressed the button. Explosions ripped through the facility. Jax and Grayson ran, dodging falling debris. The entire base shook, alarms blaring. They leaped out just as fire consumed the command center. Outside, they watched the flames rise. Zenith had been dealt a serious blow, but Jax knew this wasn't over. Grayson clapped him on the back. We did good. Jax exhaled. Yeah. Then he looked at the burning facility. Zenith would come back, stronger. But now he was ready for them. Smoke rose from the burning Zenith facility, casting an eerie glow over the ruined battlefield. The sound of distant sirens echoed through the city as Jax stood beside Grayson, watching the flames consume everything they had just destroyed. Jax clenched his fists. He should have felt victorious. They had taken down Commander Ro, crippled Zenith's operations in Titan 9, and sent a message that they wouldn't be hunted anymore. But he knew this wasn't the end. Grayson exhaled, lowering his gun. We need to move before reinforcements arrive. Jax nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. Zenith will come back, won't they? Grayson looked at him. Yeah. And they won't be happy. Jax's grip tightened around his blade. He wasn't afraid anymore. He had changed, no longer a weak orphan hiding in the shadows. Now he was a fighter, a warrior. But something still felt unfinished. We should disappear, Grayson continued. Lay low for a while. Jax hesitated. What if we don't run? Grayson frowned. What? Jax turned to him, eyes sharp. What if we don't hide? What if we take the fight to them? Grayson studied him for a long moment. That's a suicide mission, kid. Jax shook his head. Not if we do it right. He looked back at the burning facility. Zenith had spent years controlling people like him. Hybrids, experiments, cybernetic soldiers. How many others were out there? How many had been discarded, just like he had been? We're not the only ones they've hurt, Jax said. We could find others. Build something stronger than them. Grayson sighed. You're talking about a war. Jax met his gaze. They already started it. Grayson let out a dry chuckle, shaking his head. You really are stubborn. Jax smirked. I learned from the best. Grayson looked up at the sky, deep in thought. He had spent years surviving, avoiding fights that weren't necessary. But for the first time, he saw something in Jax, something bigger than revenge. Purpose. Finally, he grinned. All right, kid. Let's make some noise. 1 week later, Titan IX had changed. News of the Zenith facility's destruction had spread through the underground like wildfire. The Syndicate had gone quiet, licking its wounds, but Jax knew it wouldn't last. They were planning something. So was he. Inside an abandoned warehouse, Jax and Grayson stood before a small gathering of people, fighters, ex-soldiers, and others who had suffered under Zenith. Some were human. Others were like Jax, hybrids with cybernetic parts. All of them were tired of running. Jax stepped forward. Zenith thinks they own this city. They think they can take whatever they want. People. Lives. He glanced at Grayson, who nodded. They tried to take me, Jax continued, but they failed. And now, we fight back. Murmurs ran through the crowd. A young woman with cybernetic arms crossed her arms. You really think we can win? Jax met her gaze. I think we can make sure they lose. A tall man with a robotic eye stepped forward. You're just a kid. Why should we follow you? Jax didn't flinch. He pulled out his knife and tossed it into the air, catching it without looking. Then he pointed it at the man. Because I know what they do to people like us, and I know how to stop them. The man smirked. Fair enough. Grayson stepped up. We're not here to make speeches. We're here to hit Zenith where it hurts. And if you're with us, we start tonight. The room fell silent. Then, one by one, heads nodded. They had just started a rebellion. The first strike. The night was cold as Jax crouched on a rooftop, staring down at their target. A Zenith outpost disguised as a shipping warehouse. Grayson knelt beside him. You ready? Jax smirked. Are you? Grayson chuckled. All right, kid. Let's do this. Jax leaped first, his cybernetic legs carrying him over the fence with ease. He landed silently, rolling into the shadows. The others followed. They moved fast, silent. The first guard didn't even have time to react before Jax took him down. Grayson signaled. Move in. The team spread out, disabling security, cutting off communication lines. Jax felt alive. Every movement precise, every strike perfect. Then the alarms blared. Zenith had noticed. Jax grinned. Here we go. Guards poured into the room, weapons raised. But this time, Jax wasn't running. He was fighting. Grayson fired, taking down 2 enemies before they could react. Jax dashed forward, dodging bullets, his knife flashing. He weaved between enemies like a ghost, striking fast, disabling weapons, knocking them out. His team fought with him. And for the first time, Zenith wasn't hunting them. They were hunting Zenith. Then, a new voice echoed through the chaos. Impressive. Jax froze. He knew that voice. Through the smoke, a familiar figure stepped forward. Commander Rowe. Jax's grip tightened on his knife. I thought we left you in the fire. Rowe smirked. Zenith has many resources. You'll learn that soon. Jax glanced at Grayson. I got this. Grayson hesitated, then nodded. Don't die, kid. Jax stepped forward, facing Rowe. This time, he wasn't afraid. This time, he was ready. Rowe lunged, but Jax saw it coming. He dodged, his cybernetic legs giving him the edge. He struck back, his blade slashing. Rowe barely dodged. You have improved. Jax smirked. Yeah, and I'm just getting started. The fight was brutal. Fast, Every move, every strike. Jax was in control. Finally, he saw an opening. With one final move, he spun, his blade slicing through Ro's armor. Ro staggered back, breathing hard. Jax raised his knife. "You're done." Ro exhaled, then smiled. "Maybe, but Zenith isn't." Before Jax could react, Ro activated a device on his wrist. Explosions rocked the building. Jax stumbled as fire erupted around them. Grayson shouted, "Time to go." Jax glared at Ro, then turned and ran. They barely escaped as the building collapsed behind them. Outside, their team regrouped. Jax looked back at the flames. Zenith was still standing. But now so was he. Grayson clapped him on the back. "Looks like we've got a war to fight." Jax smirked. "Then let's win." The battle wasn't over. It was just beginning.